Welcome to On the Prowl, Florida Panthers Wash Rinse Repeat, episode 39. I'm your host, Bill. Wanted to say thank you for patiently waiting for me. I have been very busy with work the past few weeks, and we wanted to get a podcast out to you as soon as possible. So today's the day, and we're going to be more consistent with that. Just want to let you know that. Another bit of housekeeping before we get into some things here. With the holidays coming up, wanted to go ahead and let you know the first 5 people who will email me at Florida Panthers Den at gmail.com. That's Florida Panthers Den at gmail.com. I will send you a swag pack and a t-shirt. So make sure you go ahead and email me your name and address, and I'll be very happy to get that out to you. I'm going to need to do that within the next week or so because with the Christmas holiday and shipping, it's going to be a tight challenge to get it to you before the holidays hit. So if you can go ahead and do that, that would be great. So again, thank you guys for patiently waiting for me. It's been a frustrating season this year, okay, without a doubt. We started off with that just incredibly unfortunate accident for Barkov in practice before the season even started, and he was gone. And then we all knew Matthew Tkachuk was out for a while, and we're going to get to the injury situation here in a minute. And I wanted to start out, I wanted to put this meme up here for you guys, because this has kind of been what this season has been like. It's been wash, rinse, repeat. It's so over. We're so back. It's so over. We're so back. The proverbial rat on the treadmill kind of a thing. It just keeps on going. And, it seems to be no end in sight. Well, we're getting some glimmers of hope right now. And I'm gonna get into that here. But I wanted to kind of start off with this slide right here. Now, the next slide, we're going to go over the injury situation here with Matthew Tkachuk. You all know it's his groin, and we're looking at late December. The latest we've heard, and you probably heard him on his podcast with his brother Brady, he is actually skating. Now, they have a very special schedule in terms of when they're going to get him on the ice and off the ice. And he did remark, he said he actually felt better than he did when he was in the playoffs last year. So that's some encouraging news. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel. The other piece of good news right away before we get to the rest of them here is somebody that's not on that list, Eetu Luostarinen. He came back last night, and it was great to see him, and he had an impact right away. And he suffered an unfortunate accident with his barbecue, apparently his propane tank, and had some burns on his feet, believe it or not. They did some post-game interviews, and that's what he told them. So we're real thankful that he's doing well. Very thankful that he's back, and he had an impactful game last night. And look for more to come with him when he, it's a positive sign. It's something encouraging, and it's something to look forward to. Now with Cole Schwint, he has a broken arm, and they're looking like maybe possibly pre-Olympics before he can come back. Dmitry Kulikov, which I think he's one of the Panthers. I think that you realize you really kind of need this guy. He's kind of an anchor and a bedrock on the defense. His upper body, it's an upper body injury, and they're looking from what they're saying, and these are all the latest that we have are post Olympics before he would be back for something like that. Now, someone who's a real he really stirs things up in a great way, Jonah Gadjevich, upper body, and it's looking like probably post Olympics before he's back. He really has such a positive impact on the Panthers. Every time he gets out there, he gets the rest of the team engaged, and people are real. His teammates are really fired up when he's out there. He really stirs things up in the right way. And of course, Alexander Barkov, ACL, MCL, playoffs. Heard his rehab is progressing ahead of time, ahead of schedule. That's not a big surprise for Sasha Barkov. He's such a dedicated, hard and diligent worker. Wouldn't surprise me if he might be available right before the playoffs. He's working very hard at that right now. So, and then there's Thomas Nosek, his knee, and it's undisclosed in terms of his time frame when he's going to be back. So, wanted to go over the latest with the injury situation. And again, Luostarinen coming back last night in that unbelievable, thrilling win against the Blue Jackets. Really was great to see him, and he really had an impact last night, and he had some good time on the ice last night as well too. So wanted to go ahead and get that squared away right here. Now, some of the ones who are playing well, and the first one I want to talk about is Sam Reinhart. He has been so consistent in this season. His scoring, he's on pace. I think somebody said for maybe a 45 plus goal type of season this year. Why not? I mean, and he's seemed to have been at the right place at the right time, and he is scoring goals left and right. He's usually ending up with at least 1 point per game in the past several games, and he's having a really positive impact on the Panthers and their offense, which they desperately need right now because that's one of the areas that they're really kind of lacking is offense. Now, one of the other ones is, of course, Brad Marchand. I don't. This kind of goes without saying. He's kind of cooled off a little bit lately, but look at it again. Also, too, it's not necessarily scoring goals; it's setting up goals. Look at that incredible assist that he had last night on Bennett's overtime winning goal. It was just he timed it. It was incredibly perfect how he timed that. It's something, and you don't see that from like 1 or 2 year players. Okay, you see that from veteran players, and Brad has been doing that. And also, kind of a funny note, if you watched the game last night when the Blue Jackets called a timeout, Brad Marchand was poking his nose over at the bench in a playful way, which was very funny. I just got the biggest kick out of that, and so did a lot of other fans and the commentators as well too. So that was really funny. But again, he's another kind of guy. He provides a spark, a catalyst. He really I have seen. I want to say that I've seen a big change in him in a positive way since he left the Bruins and came to the Panthers. And I really do. I think he was kind of stuck in a rut with the Bruins, but here with the Panthers, I really think he's found a niche. Bill Zito again, making the right move to get him here and then signing him it's just golden. It's just absolutely positively golden. And then one of the other ones here is Mackie Samoskevich. Not necessarily showing up on the scoreboard, but wow, his presence, he's aggressive on the forecheck. He digs in corners for pucks. He sets up plays. He's all over the ice, and he's really progressed. And I just wish he would find the back of the net. I mean, it's just so unfortunate. He's had a lot of bad bounces, so to speak, and not going in the net. But he will get his chances, and he's going to be an impactful player here. But I think he's really had a lot of positive impact on the Panthers this season, especially with the absence of so many players out of the lineup. Now, I put this list together here because I was trying to go through some things and thinking about, what are some of the areas of concern for the Panthers? Where do you see them, falling in each game when they fall short and end up on the losing end of things? And first and foremost is injuries, and that's the nature of the beast. That's the part of the game. That's something that's going to happen. I mean, we're not the only ones. I think Tampa had like almost 8 or 9 players out of their lineup as well. So, this is, and no other team except for probably the Rockies has been very consistent this year in terms of their winning and playing well. So, it's kind of like going out to almost all the teams right now. This injury bug, it's really kind of hit a lot of the teams, and it's how you respond to things like that. And part of that is finding the right lines. Now, that's a job for Paul and the coaching staff to do that, and that's a Herculean effort. I mean, it takes a lot to get when you have a healthy lineup to keep that fine balance of finding, who's going to be best on the wings, who's going to be the best center, who's going to be the best defensive pairing for that line as well too. It's a delicate balancing act, being able to find that. And that's something that, again, Paul and the staff, I think they work tirelessly. A lot of people, don't really know how much time and effort that they put into this. I mean, it takes a lot. You just don't go ahead out there and throw these lines together willy-nilly. It takes a lot of, practice and especially patience and, looking at things. And, you really have to give Paul a lot of credit because he takes a step back. He looks at some of these things and makes some adjustments and makes some tweaks here. Okay. One of the other things is defense. And, this is one of the areas I think I've had, I think that one of the biggest concerns this year, because I look for me, and I know a lot of people like Aaron Ekblad, but and think of him as an anchor on defense. I really think Kulikov's an anchor on defense, and I really think because his presence, I think they're missing him. And defense is tied directly to goaltending, okay? Because um, Daniil and Sergey, they are fantastic goaltenders, both of them. All right. And I know a lot of people have been riding them lately and they've given up some soft goals. Well, yes, that's true. They have given up some soft goals, but a goaltender is as only good as the defense in front of him. And unfortunately, in many occasions, I'm not seeing the defense there to support the goaltenders. So, it's kind of a two-way street as far as that's concerned. But, we have good solid goaltending. Okay. Getting Demille was a brilliant stroke, of course, again by Bill Zito. It's working out really well. I think he's great. Fortunately, his first 4 games, he had almost no goal support, so he was on the losing end of things. But he's been playing extremely well. Uh, and then there comes the power play, and a lot of people can see it's because we have these injuries, it really does affect the power play. It does affect who you're going to have quarterbacking the power play at times. And one of the bright spots I've seen is Seth Jones. I think he's done really well. I think he has a great shot from the point, and it's accurate. And that's another thing too. And I didn't have it on this list. This areas of concern is shooting accuracy. And I don't know if the NHL keeps stats on this or not, but it's so frustrating when you're watching the broadcast and you're hearing Goldie or Randy saying, a shot misses the net, shot misses the net, and these guys are professionals, and it really kind of, how many years have they been playing hockey? And these shots should be closer to or on net, and it's really frustrating from a podcasters and a fan's perspective to hear that all the time. And I think that's something that they need to work on, is their shot accuracy as far as that's concerned. And then I think the last thing here is playing 60 minutes, because go back to several of the games, and we're going to look at the past 5 games, but go back to some of those games and you'll find that they might have played 20 or 40 minutes, but they haven't played a full 60 minutes. And because of that, that really will lend them to being on the wrong side of the score sheet. It really does. There were a couple of games they played really well in a middle period, say, or in a first period, but then the last 2 periods they're not, and they end up losing the game, and that's probably why. So it's coming back again to this consistency of playing a full 60 minutes. You can't emphasize something like that enough here. Okay, now these are some of the games. These are the past 5 games, and I wanted to take a look at these, and if you really look at them, these first 3 games against the Flyers, the Flames, and then the Predators, these are kind of games. Let's say we have a full healthy lineup. Okay, these are games. I won't say they're automatic wins, because there's no such thing as an automatic win, but they should be fairly easy wins. All right, and the Panthers had struggles against all 3 of these teams. Okay, and of course they ended up losing to all 3 of these teams, which you know granted, we have the injury situation that we have to deal with, but these were winnable games. Okay. For example, look at the game against the Flyers. They had 27 shots on goal that game. All right. And again, look at the shots on goal in the game against Calgary, had 39 here. So, and yes, they do run into some hot goaltenders as well. But I think a part of the problem is because of the injuries in the lineup, we really don't have net front presence out there like we normally do. Bennett has to change his role up as well in terms of how when he's out there, say for instance, on a power play and shooting from the point and things like that. There's so many things that you have to take into consideration with that. And the game against Nashville in particular, that was really frustrating to watch that game. And they were up 1-0 most of the game till about 10 minutes left in the third period, and Nashville ended up tying it, and then they won in overtime. Now, conversely, you go to the game against the Maple Leafs. Yeah, the Maple Leafs, they're having their struggles as well too. They're not they're not the juggernaut they were last season, and they've had some injury bugs as well, and some other players haven't been playing well, but they came to play, and it was a sound game for them. Okay, that wasn't. I don't want to say it wasn't a close game, but it really wasn't. Toronto dominated that game mostly from start to finish. Now the game yesterday against the Blue Jackets, that was one of the wildest games I've seen in the past several years. There was no lead that was safe in that game. In fact, the Panthers didn't lead until Bennett scored the game-winning goal. And there were several points in time that the Blue Jackets were ahead, and unfortunately, the Blue Jackets have had this unfortunate pattern this year of blowing leads in games, and they did it again. They were up 4-1, I believe, and then they were up, I think, 6-4, and we ended up tying it up, and then we ended up winning it in overtime in a very thrilling fashion from Marchand to Sam Bennett with I believe 3.2 seconds left. That was an incredible game. It was fun to watch that, and of course today I'm recording this broadcast on Sunday, December 7th. We play the Islanders at 4:30, and then we go on a little bit of a road trip here. So hopefully they can go ahead and get another win and start the road trip off on the right foot as far as that's concerned. Some of the players that need to step up, and I had done these slides ahead of time. Obviously Sam Bennett scored the game-winning goal last night, and he was number one star of the game. But generally speaking, he's really kind of been silent. And I think for the Panthers to be an effective team, they need the Conn Smythe winner to be on the score sheet more often than not, and he really hasn't been in large parts of this season. And it's really kind of I don't want to say it's mysterious, but I don't want to say it's not expected, because again, when you understand and you look at the dynamics of the team right now, they're missing a lot of key players right now, and it's making a big difference. And it's making a big difference on how Paul Maurice utilizes Sam Bennett, and his role. And his role does change as far as that's concerned. So I do get it, and I do understand that. But Sam is a goal scorer, all right? And it would be really nice if he can get a little more consistency in terms of getting some points on the board and getting some goals on the board. So, that's one of the things I think the coaching staff is looking for from him as well. Now, one of the other players is Aaron Ekblad. I really like Aaron Ekblad. I think he's a good, solid defenseman. But there's been some gaps in judgment. I don't know if it's positioning or what, but on several goals, he's just looked out of position and not able to make plays. And it's real frustrating watching it. From a fan's and a podcaster's perspective, you can see, some of these goals happening ahead of time because these players are out of position. And I'm finding that a lot with Aaron Ekblad. And I think the coaching staff needs to work with him to help him get into better positions to help, defend and give his goaltender, whether it's Demille or Sergey, uh, some help, some support as far as that's concerned. So, but all in all, he's a good and he's a consistent player. I think he's a leader in the locker room. And, and in order to be a leader in the locker room, you also need to be a leader on the ice. And unfortunately, I think during a large part of this season, he's found himself out of position. And I think that's really cost the Panthers a lot in terms of some of these games. Yeah, this came out December the 3rd. Jessica Blaylock, who is the analyst on Script Sports, she does the pregame show and in between periods with Jovo, had a fantastic question for Paul Maurice. And I really wanted to spend some time and go over this. Considering the injuries and what the Cats have had to battle so far this year, I asked Paul Maurice if the biggest challenge right now is finding your identity or figuring out how to play consistently. Here was his response. And you can go out to Jessica, if you follow her on X, and there's a video on this, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I wanted to put some of the quotes down there because I thought these were very meaningful quotes. The first quote was, "We can't play that style as in previous seasons." And what Paul means by that is, of course, because we're missing so many players. Okay, we can't. The style he's referring to, we're not spending as much, and then conversely, we're not spending as much time in the offensive zone as we like, and that's because we have different personnel out there. All right, when you have a full lineup in with Kachuk and Barkov and Kulikov and others, you can spend more time in that offensive zone. It's starting to pick up a little bit, but he's trying to get people into this mindset here. But we can certainly try, was his next response, when he was replying back to Jessica with that. And that really makes a lot of sense. Being able to try, being able to, make, really give it a shot. And I've seen some of that, it's happened in spurts. I did see that in some parts of the Columbus game yesterday, where they were able to spend some extended time in the offensive zone. And it's not like the first or second line; it's either the third or the fourth line, and making some difference. And Loisterinen, jumped in right away, and he had an impact in yesterday's game, and I thought that was very meaningful, and that was great to see. Um, and I think this last part right here is very thought provoking. Got to be careful how hard you squeeze a team with a bunch of guys out. Paul knows there's a delicate balance between how much you push a team and how much you take your foot off the gas pedal as far as that's concerned, because you don't want to go too far, because you realize with a number of the key players that are out for the Panthers right now, their core, the makeup is different right now. It's different chemistry. It's different line combinations. Okay. And, you can't expect some of these patchwork lines to do what some of the lines, normal lines can do. That's just not going to happen. So, and that's where he and the coaching staff, I think, excel, and they're doing a good job. And when I say they're doing a good job, I know where they're at in terms of points in last place and everything. But the whole point right now is for them to keep their head above water, and I think they're going to be able to do that. I think if they can string a few wins together, I think that will help as well too. Hopefully, that can continue with the Islanders here as well. And it will build upon itself. Success will build upon success. And we're going to get players back, more than likely the end of December. The second best player, obviously, on the team, Matthew Tkachuk. And everybody knows, and there's no question about the catalyst and the spark that he would bring to the team. And then probably after that, it looks like possibly Kulikov will be back, probably post-Olympics, but still, that's within that time frame and within that. And, already, like I said, with Listerine coming back, there was a positive impact already from something like that. So that's good news, and that's something to build on. And that's some things that I want you to take as Cats fans, understanding, it's going to get better. Okay. It will get better here. Now, one of the things that I did, because I was very curious as to what fans thought were the problems with the Panthers this year. Was it injuries? Was it lack of motivation? Were they physically tired? Or was it a combination of all three of them? And 75 people, I mean, it's just a small sample, but still 52% said injuries and 41.3% said all three of them. Okay. So, in some ways or shape or form, the lack of motivation and physically tired, in other words, that kind of translates over to the cup hangover, okay, which we talked about in a previous podcast. But, the injuries are something, it's kind of a fact of life. It's something that you have to deal with. And we knew coming into the season we were going to be without Matthew Tkachuk, and then boom, preseason, Barkov, his knee, and it's just like, wow, how much more incredibly worse can you get? And then you start losing guys like Nosek and Gadjevich and Kulikov, and it starts to spiral. And we've had to call up a number of players from Charlotte this year, making some right moves. And some of these players have had, I think, have had a positive impact on the team. So, we're kind of going forward here, and I think they will get there. I think we just have to be patient with all of this. It is a long season. I can't say enough how much Paul has talked about. The regular season is a marathon and not a sprint, and you just have to get to the point where you make the playoffs. All right, you don't get style points. The President's Trophy is more of a curse than a blessing to anybody. You get home ice advantage, yeah, but in motivation, all right, that's something that is a delicate balance. And as Paul said with that quote, knowing when to push them and when to not push them, and that lies within that as well too. hitting the right buttons and knowing when to get on that accelerator pedal and when to back off as far as that's concerned. Now, of course, I just said players will be back from injury, and that's an obvious, and that's a given. And we can see already the impact that has with Loisterinen coming back already. And roster moves. Zito's always looking for ways to help improve the Panthers. Brango, that Zito picked up off of waivers from Ottawa. I think he's been an impactful player. Quite frankly, I think he's been better than Petrie, and I wish he would play him more. I really do. I like him a lot. And then, of course, Paul and his staff. I mean, trust in them to help the Panthers. They're gonna do everything they can to help keep the Panthers, help keep their head above water during this streak. And I think they will. And I think you're going to see an upturn and an uptick and an upswing. It starts with Loisterinen. I think, like I said, let's get a couple of wins under our belts. Let's get like 2 or 3 here. That would be real nice if they could do that. And even in some of the losses, if they can play more consistently and better, it would bode well for them. No, I don't know if I heard this last year or maybe the year before, but I think Paul Maurice said he really doesn't start looking at standings until probably January, late January, early February. He doesn't even look at them right now. They're inconsequential to him. He's focused on trying to get this team to play the best that they can, which as he should. He shouldn't be having to take care of that with a scoreboard. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of for the podcast for this week. Wanted to remind everybody again. I have some swag to give away. If I mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, 5 of you, if you email me at floridapanthersden@gmail.com, I got some Florida Panthers Den swag and a t-shirt. I would be more than happy to send to you. Make sure that you send me your name and address, and I can get that here. This is, unfortunately, it's limited to those of us here in the United States because I don't have the capability to be able to mail things overseas. So, again, love to get you some swag. First 5 people, email me at floridapanthersden@gmail.com and go from there. Want to thank everybody again for waiting patiently for another podcast. We're going to be more consistent. I'm going to try to get some of our friends back on and join me for some episodes. They're always good. You know who the usual suspects are. David Dork is absolutely fantastic. I'd like to get George or Alex, but they're almost impossible to get a hold of. But then, of course, there's our good friend Rod Peterson. We'll get him on as well too. And the Cats and Bolts podcast is the #1 hockey podcast in the state of Florida for an excellent reason. So, as always, guys, time to hunt.